Abandoned lion cubs face severe survival threats, but occasionally, extraordinary interventions occur, such as shepherd dogs nursing these cubs. When lionesses abandon their cubs due to stress, illness, or environmental pressures, these vulnerable cubs usually face high mortality rates without maternal care. However, there have been remarkable cases where domestic animals, such as shepherd dogs, have stepped in to nurse these cubs. This cross-species nursing is rare and can provide the abandoned cubs with a crucial lifeline, offering them the necessary nourishment to survive during their most vulnerable stages. Such instances highlight both the adaptability of wildlife and the unexpected interactions between domestic and wild species, shedding light on complex animal behaviors and the interdependencies in nature. In the heart of South Africa's rugged Umfolozi wildlife sanctuary, something extraordinary unfolded. A young lioness named Zahra, recently rescued from near starvation, gave birth to two tiny cubs, bundles of golden fur barely larger than a human hand. The staff, overjoyed, saw it as a miracle. Zahra, the survivor, had brought new life into the world, but the miracle turned into heartbreak. Zahra, distant and haunted by past trauma, rejected her newborns. She refused to nurse or even acknowledge them, pacing her enclosure in growing distress. Days passed, and the cubs' soft cries grew weaker. Their tiny ribs became visible, their once faint movements now barely noticeable. The staff watched in helpless agony, knowing time was running out. Would these cubs, born in hope, perish in silence? Talia, the head caretaker, stood over them with clenched fists and a breaking heart. "We can't lose them," she whispered. With Zahra unresponsive and the cubs fading, the team made a difficult choice. They gently lifted the fragile siblings, one male, one female, from their mother's side. Their bodies were cold, their breaths shallow. The team moved quickly, unaware that the solution would come not from another lion, but from a creature they'd never expect. A miracle was on its way. Back in the sanctuary's medical wing, the race to save the cubs began. Talia and her team worked in silence, their faces tense with urgency. Warm towels wrapped the tiny bodies as a vet gently inserted a dropper of special milk formula into the male cub's mouth. At first, nothing. No movement, no sound. Then, a weak flick of his tongue, a breath. Hope. The female cub, even smaller, barely responded. Her fur was thin, her paws limp, her eyes still shut. "Come on, little one," Talia murmured, her voice breaking. Hour by hour, the team rotated through shifts, feeding, monitoring, warming them. A soft heartbeat here, a tiny yawn there. Each sign was celebrated like a victory. By the third day, the male cub opened his eyes, cloudy but alert. The female followed 2 days later, her gaze weak but searching. Still, the team knew formula alone wouldn't be enough. Lion cubs needed real maternal milk to grow strong bones and build immunity. What they lacked wasn't just nutrients, it was touch, warmth, the instinctual care only a mother could give. As the cubs whimpered softly in their makeshift nest, Talia stared out the window, praying for a solution. Then her phone buzzed, with an offer so unexpected it seemed impossible. The miracle arrived on 4 muddy paws. Her name was Ruby, an 8-year-old German shepherd from a nearby farming village. She had just weaned her last litter of puppies when her owner, hearing of the sanctuary's crisis, offered her help. The staff was skeptical. Ruby had always been wary of cats, barking at them relentlessly. Could she possibly accept 2 lion cubs? It felt like a desperate gamble. But with no other options, they brought Ruby to the cubs' enclosure. The room fell silent as she stepped in. The cubs, too weak to react, lay curled in a nest of blankets. Ruby paused, nose twitching, sniffing the unfamiliar scent. Then, slowly, she approached. With a gentle nudge, she lay down beside them and nudged the female cub toward her belly. Talia held her breath. Would Ruby reject them? But the lion cub latched on, drinking deeply. The second followed. Tears welled in Talia's eyes. Ruby had accepted them. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Ruby cleaned them, nuzzled them, and stood guard through the night. A dog who once snarled at house cats was now mothering Africa's fiercest predators. In that moment, species didn't matter. Only love did. The sanctuary had witnessed the impossible, and it had a heartbeat. Within hours, Ruby, South Africa's unlikely savior, settled into her new role as mother. Her instincts kicked in like a flame to dry tinder. She nursed the cubs with astonishing gentleness, adjusting her body so both could feed comfortably. The male cub latched eagerly, but it was the frail little lioness who worried everyone, too weak to even lift her head. But Ruby never gave up. She licked her face, nuzzled her tiny frame, and stayed curled around her through the night, a living blanket of warmth and love. By the third morning, something miraculous happened. The lioness lifted her head and squeaked. Cheers echoed across the reserve. Ruby wasn't just feeding them, she was healing them. Every hour, she cleaned their coats with her coarse tongue, stimulating blood flow and guarding against infection. When they cried, she responded instantly, never letting them feel alone. Talia, watching from outside the pen, whispered, "She's more lion than dog." As the weeks passed, the cubs grew stronger. They followed Ruby around like oversized puppies, pouncing on her tail and tumbling in the straw. Ruby never snapped, never turned away. She had become their world. And the staff? They watched in awe as love, pure, unconditional, cross-species love, worked a miracle no one thought possible. As the cubs grew, so did their strength, and their bond with Ruby, the German shepherd who had become their mother. What began as an act of instinct transformed into something deeper, something unexplainable. The male cub, now bold and curious, would tug at Ruby's ears playfully, while his sister, once frail and silent, now pounced with surprising agility, her amber eyes glowing with newfound life. But time was catching up. The cubs' roars deepened, their paws grew massive, and their playful wrestling began to overpower Ruby's aging body. Talia knew the moment was near. It was time to let Ruby go. The decision weighed heavily on the entire team. Ruby had not just saved the cubs, she had shaped their very identities. Her scent, her warmth, her love had imprinted on them in ways no one could have imagined. On the morning of her departure, the sanctuary fell silent. The lions, now towering over Ruby, brushed against her gently. She licked their manes one last time, then turned toward the gate. No one moved. No one spoke. With slow, steady steps, Ruby left the enclosure, her job done. Back in her home village, Ruby rested peacefully, but in the wild heart of Umfolozi, two lions stood tall, living proof of the love that saved them. 2 years later, the sun blazed over Umfolozi, casting golden light across the lion enclosure where Zahra's cubs, now mighty young adults, roamed with regal strength. Their manes thick, their roars echoing through the sanctuary, they had grown into the very essence of wild majesty. Yet beneath that power was a story few could believe. That day, a familiar vehicle rolled up the dusty trail. Inside sat Sandra, the aging German shepherd who had once nursed them from death's edge. Her muzzle now dusted with gray, her movements slower, but her heart unchanged. As the gate opened, she stepped forward hesitantly. The staff held their breath, uncertain what the lions would do. The young male lifted his head, nostrils flaring as he caught a scent long buried in memory. Then, with a low, guttural purr, he approached, his sister trailing just behind. In an instant, recognition flashed across their golden eyes. They bounded forward, not with aggression, but joy. Massive paws landed gently beside Sandra, and their heads bowed to nuzzle against her neck. The staff were stunned. These apex predators remembered. They remembered the warmth, the safety, the mother who had once wrapped them in love. And now they returned it. The wild had not erased their bond. It had preserved it. In a world often divided by species, instincts, and survival, the story of Ruby, a German shepherd, and 2 abandoned lion cubs teaches us a profound truth. Love transcends boundaries. Ruby didn't just offer milk, she offered warmth, comfort, and a mother's devotion to creatures not her own. She turned instinct into purpose and gave life where there was almost none. The cubs, once frail and near death, grew into powerful lions, but never forgot the gentle soul who saved them. Their tearful reunion years later proved that real connections don't fade with time, they grow stronger. This tale reminds us that compassion, when freely given, can bridge even the wildest of divides. No act of love is ever wasted, and sometimes the most unexpected hearts hold the greatest courage. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your support helps spread hope, one story at a time.